Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. So look, today I'm just going to talk to you about a toolkit we've developed called Learning Together, tools to help you get the support you need at school. So first off, I'm just going to start with an acknowledgement of country. The Australian Centre for Disability Law, we acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Our offices are situated on the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. And because we're lawyers, we always start with a bit of a disclaimer. So the material in this presentation is information only. It's not legal advice, and you should seek legal advice about any particular questions, and you're welcome to contact us afterwards. So who are we? We're a community legal centre in New South Wales, and we assist people across New South Wales who have a disability, and we specialise in disability discrimination law. So we provide free legal advice and representation, legal information and referrals, and community legal education like this one today. And we realised about 40% probably of our casework is around education and people not getting the supports and the adjustments they need to participate fully in their education. And we realised a lot of students and their families didn't know about their rights, and how to communicate with their education provider to build a good relationship and get a really good outcome. So we applied and got a project funded by the Department of Social Services under their individual capacity building program to put together some information and some support and some training for parents, for students. And so we've worked together with advocates, parents and students and teachers to put together this information. So the project has 3 phases. The first phase was the toolkit itself, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. And then we've also done community training. So we do that online regularly. And we're also doing it face-to-face across New South Wales. And then we're also translating the toolkit into other languages and doing training in those other languages. So today I'm going to show you the toolkit and touch on some of the key aspects of advocating for your child's education, or if you're a student yourself, advocating on your own behalf. And so while the toolkit has been developed in New South Wales, I'm aware that most everyone here is in Victoria. So all the information is actually equally applicable across Australia, because it's really just information and advocacy tips about how to really build that relationship, have effective communication, and what your rights are. So the only New South Wales specific information is in part 5, which talks about New South Wales legislation, but it also talks about the federal Commonwealth legislation as well. So really the toolkit's applicable wherever you are, if you're a student with disability in education. So I'm just going to show you a little video now. We've put together a video tour of the toolkit. So the toolkit itself is an online document. So I'm just going to quickly switch my share and see if that works.
Welcome to a virtual tour of the toolkit, Learning Together. Tools to help you get the support you need at school. Learning Together is a toolkit for students with disability and their families in New South Wales, developed by the Australian Centre for Disability Law. The toolkit is an online document which opens as a PDF. We keep it online because the web page has other things, like accessible versions of the toolkit, other languages, other resources, videos, and upcoming training sessions. We would love for you to share this resource. Just send the link above to your friends and family so that they can get the most up-to-date information. Your trainer will give you the link in your session today. This is what you first see when you open the Learning Together toolkit. This page goes through some of the words and ideas we use in the toolkit. As you can see from the contents page, the toolkit has 6 parts, and we will go through these in more detail during today's training. The first part is called Me and My Goals. This is all about you and what you want from the education experience. If you're a parent, this might include your hopes for your child's education and what a normal day at school looks like for them. At the end of each section in the toolkit, there is a list of helpful tools. These links will take you to other websites, videos, and documents that you might find helpful. Part 2 focuses on your rights in education. As a student with disability, you have a right to participate in education on the same basis as everyone else. This section goes through the laws and standards that protect your right to education. It also explains what things the school or education provider should do to support you. Part 3 is about reasonable adjustments and how these should be made to help you learn. There are some examples of different types of adjustments. There are also some great tips from parents about how to ask for adjustments. We include real-life case studies because it can help to know what works for other students and families. This one is about Henry. This one is about Mac. This part talks about different types of adjustments for visible and invisible disabilities and how to have those discussions with the school. This is an example of an individual education plan. You can use this as a template for working with your school. It focuses on goals and strengths, as well as the supports required. We also talk about other plans, such as behaviour management or discipline, that you might need to discuss with your school. Part 4 is all about communication. There are different times during your education when communication is really important. So we include some tips from families and advocates to help with these key points. There are tips about meetings and how to make sure you're prepared, as well as the importance of putting things in writing so that you have a record of what you discussed. Here are things that may not work as well in terms of communication and better ways to approach them instead. Part 5 of the toolkit is about what to do when things aren't working. We explain how to make a complaint, starting within the school and then outside the school if necessary. Part 5 also includes quite a bit of detail about the formal disability discrimination legal complaint process if everything else has failed. There are some detailed case studies to help you understand how this might work. If you're looking for further support, whether it's legal advice or help with advocacy, Part 6 of the toolkit includes a list of organisations in New South Wales that you can contact.
Alrighty, so hopefully I'm back on the presentation and I'm just going to share my video so I can see what I'm doing. Great. So as you can see, the toolkit itself. Oh, apologies. Why is it not doing that? Slide. Oh, it's going to go back from the beginning. Let's do that. All right. Resume slide. There you go. There you go. All good. Thanks everyone for your patience. Alrighty, so as you can see, the toolkit itself has a lot of really helpful information. I'm just going to briefly go through some of the key points in this session, just so you've got a bit of a sense of them. And if you want more information, the toolkit's there at your fingertips. So really what we suggest is the first thing to do if you're a student or if you're a parent or carer of a student is think, what do we want from this education experience? Knowing the student as a whole, what are our goals? What are the things we're looking for? And what are their strengths? What are the things they like doing? What are their hopes and dreams? And then put together all that information and make sure you bring that with you if you're having meetings with your education provider. So if you're going to your school and you're having a meeting, bring that with you so everyone remembers who the student is, who you're talking about. Helps contextualize them as a person and helps everyone remember, okay, this is what we're all working towards. So it could be a book with pictures, it could be a video, it could be a recording, it could be a PowerPoint, it could be a letter that you write to the teacher. It should be something, though, that you keep up to date, has some visuals, has some strength, and is kind of positive language, and just really focuses on that student. So that's really the first step, thinking, what do we want, and what are we going to be focusing on? You also have the right to be consulted and to have adjustments made. And what that means is that really you have the right to be consulted about what supports and adjustments are needed to ensure that as a student with a disability, you get the same education as everybody else. Obviously, there's things that you might need to happen differently to ensure that you get that same education. And that's what we talk about when we talk about adjustments. But you've got the right to be consulted with the school about what those are, and talk about how that works, including the people involved, so you and your family or any other experts that need to be involved in that discussion, and at various stages, so before enrolment or when something's changing. And you've got the right to have those adjustments made so that you can participate on that same basis, and to have things reconsidered if things change. So it's important to make sure that, you know, you have those meetings and you have those discussions, and know that you have the right to be involved in those discussions. So a reasonable adjustment is something that helps a student with disability take part in education on the same basis as other students. And so that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about the supports you need at school, we're talking about an adjustment. So something that helps you learn more easily, that helps you learn better. And it could be a lot of different things. And I'm going to go through some examples because sometimes it helps think about what those could be. They could happen in the classroom. It could be in the playground. It could be to excursions or camps. It could be to the curriculum and the assessments. The toolkit obviously covers from sort of early and what I'm talking about today generally covers from sort of early education and preschool, all through primary and secondary, TAFE, university, and further education. So talking about sort of school, but obviously think about all elements if that's where you are in your educational journey. But in terms of examples, so I'm just going to give some examples. Obviously, every student is different and every student with disability is different. So obviously there'll be individual adjustments. But it might be things like different ways to access information. So things like changing the colour of pages or the text size of materials, putting materials in easy read, using visual cues or social stories to help with transition times, breaking tasks up using scaffolding or presenting differently, or using multimedia or PowerPoint or visual presentations. Could be things like assistive technology. So that could be captioned video or screen readers. It could be an audio lip system. It could be an Auslan interpreter. It could be use of iPads for typing. It could be use of microphones or a sound system. Changes to the environment, so it could include things like sensory spaces or a calm down area. It could be physical changes, so things like ramps, lowering benches, putting handles, tactile indicators in the playground, lifts if required, accessible bathrooms, anything that makes the physical space more accessible, or things like seating preferences in classrooms to ensure things for vision or hearing. Could include things like changes to excursions or assemblies. So it might be ensuring they're at a location that's accessible, including additional support people, having smaller assemblies or allowing support such as headphones. If adjustments are also made for teaching or learning, as we've been talking about, then similar adjustments should be made for assessment tasks. So things like additional time, rest breaks, using a computer or using a scribe or a reader, using a separate room, using an Auslan interpreter or whatever technology you otherwise use to communicate, or changing the format of a task so that it can be done differently. An adjustment could also be something like additional training for teachers from your team. So if you've got speech pathologists or occupational therapists or other members of your team, and there's particular things that would help for the teacher to know how to, work with certain technology or certain processes, then that sort of training could be an adjustment that you ask for from the school to get the teachers up to speed with what they need to support you. And we also suggest that you think about if there's some behavioural aspects to your disability or your student's disability, thinking about proposing changes to the student behaviour or discipline process, because often there's sort of behaviours that might otherwise lead to things like detentions or other processes, but they're a result of a disability. So it really should be something that there's a plan in place for how to sort of de-escalate and lots of different interventions before you get to that formal discipline process. The key part really, though, of working with your education provider is communication. We say think of yourselves as a team. And that's why it's so important to, at the start, think about what your vision is and then just keep focusing on that all the way throughout. Because obviously, sometimes having these discussions can be quite fraught and can be stressful. But if you all think about what you're trying to achieve, which is the best educational outcome, and thinking of yourselves as working for that same goal, that can often really help. What we suggest is during the enrolment process, think about what a whole school day or what a whole day at that education space looks like, and consider what sort of adjustments might be needed for the whole day. So from the start, from drop-off, is there an assembly? Are there lines? How are we getting to class? What are the first lessons of the day? What's happening in the playground with recess and lunch and then other classes? Think about all of those aspects, and then think about what supports will be needed and the kind of examples I've been giving and other things that you might already be aware of. Then organise a meeting to discuss what these additional needs or supports would be. Don't presume that they're just going to be happening, or don't presume that you can't have that discussion. Be proactive on that discussion front and say, okay, I want to have a meeting so we can put together a plan and work out how these supports are going to be implemented. You want to provide as much information as possible and really put things in writing, so put together a plan. So the toolkit's actually got an example individual education plan, as you would have seen. So you can use that as a bit of a guide for the kind of things you want to focus on. And it might be that you've got some examples of where things have worked in the past from another educational setting. And so you can suggest those. It might be that the teachers have got some great ideas. Or it might be that no one really knows what supports are needed. So that's when you might want to get an expert to come and assess the environment. So it might be a speech pathologist or your occupational therapist. But share examples of when things have gone well or what sort of strengths and capabilities your student has, because it again shows that there are sort of positive aspects and it's not just the disability and the supports. And be willing to compromise and trial things and just see how things go, and reassess and make sure that you do have that discussion about regular reassessment. Also, at the start of your educational journey, or the start of the year with a new teacher or a new class, think about ongoing communication and establishing a system for that. So how are you going to keep in touch with the teacher or a learning support or whoever you're going to keep in touch with? Is there going to be a phone call every couple of weeks to check in, maybe an email every week or every month? Are there some apps that they use? You're going to have a regular meeting every term. Discuss how to raise issues and give feedback, but how you're going to have a regular discussion. And also agree on a realistic timeframe for communication and response on both sides to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So say if I send an email on this day, I'll expect a response within this timeframe. Sometimes people can get sort of caught up on unreasonable expectations of instant response on either side. So if you start establishing that discussion from the outset about here's how we're going to communicate and here's when I'll expect a response, it can really just help everyone be on the same page. We also recommend positive feedback. It's something often we forget. We're very good at complaining, and obviously there's a time when that needs to happen. But if something's worked well, tell someone, let teachers know, let the school know, actually, we tried that and that worked really well. We want us to keep going. It makes sure good things keep happening, but also it's a really good way to keep that relationship healthy. Everyone likes to hear when they're doing a good job. When specific issues or events do arise, think about the best way to approach the matter. Do you need to have a meeting? Is there an upcoming excursion? You need to talk about how you're going to plan and how it's going to work? Or is it just something small that's come up? You can have a quick chat with the teacher. And if you do have that sort of quick chat or a meeting, we always suggest follow up in writing afterwards. And the reason we talk about putting things in writing is so everyone knows what happened and what everyone's agreed on. And you've got something to refer back to later if you need to, for both sides, because often there's many things being discussed. It's hard for everybody to remember everything. So put it in writing, whether that's an email, follow-up or a letter, just so everyone's on the same page. If you are sending email, we do suggest try and focus on the main points and the main issue. Try not, think about yourself if you're reading an email, how you're going to receive that. And you want to try and be as focused as possible. Try and avoid that emotional language, things that might be involving blaming or kind of you. If you're complaining though, which you can do, of course, be clear about what happened and what you want to happen differently. So keep it focused. If you're giving positive feedback, be clear about what you liked. What we suggest is try and have those in separate set of emails so everything doesn't get lumped together. Try and make it clear what you are talking about in your email. There'll be meetings. It's okay to talk about the purpose of the meeting and who's coming. So if the school asks you to come to a meeting, ask, okay, what's this meeting about? Who can I bring? Can I bring a support person? It's always good to have a support person. Who else is going to be there from the school? Is there anyone else I should bring? What documents should I have? Is there an agenda? It's okay to ask all of those questions so that you're as prepared as possible. And if you're hosting a meeting or if you ask the school for a meeting, again, provide that information so everyone is on the same page. Use an agenda and take notes. So if someone else isn't going to take the notes and the minutes and send them around, you can do that. But if someone already is, that's great too. But bring important documents and information with you. So again, that things can get dealt with at the time if possible. Try to separate your feelings from what's being discussed. And we know that's the hardest part, obviously, when you're talking as a student yourself or if you're talking as a parent. But try and think about, again, everyone focusing on what you're trying to achieve, which is the best educational outcome for your student. And if you're a parent, we do suggest involve your child as much as possible in meetings. It's important for them to learn those valuable self-advocacy skills. And often they can bring up things that you might not have thought of or bring a different perspective. If things aren't working, and sometimes that is the case, despite all your preparation and discussion, then the toolkit does also talk through how to make a complaint and effective ways of doing so. It goes through the internal complaint process, an external complaint process above the school, and then it also goes into quite a bit of detail, which I'm not going to touch on at all today, about a legal complaint, which is a disability discrimination complaint. All I will say is suggest it's a last resort. And if you're at that point, please do get some legal advice to get to about your options. You can either contact us and we can give you a referral if we can't assist, or there's many other centres that you can also contact. But if you are raising a complaint before you're at that point of a legal complaint, if you're just raising a complaint about something that's happened and you want to try and get it resolved, what we do suggest is try and complain to the lowest level that you can to de-escalate it, if that makes sense. So if something's not working, raise it directly with the teacher or staff member themselves first, if you can, directly or in writing. It might have been that there's a misunderstanding or miscommunication. It could be cleared up with a quick meeting or a response email. Not always, but often that can happen. If you're not happy with that response, then raise it obviously within the school and higher up with a new communication and set a time frame for when you expect a response. But again, if you are putting together a complaint, again, focus on what you're trying to achieve, which is keeping that relationship going and getting that best educational outcome and support. So try to bring a positive attitude, even if you're making a complaint. Be clear and factual. I always suggest drafting something, putting it aside for a little bit, coming back to it, maybe getting someone else to have a look at it to see what that emotional language is, or to see what a different perspective is, or imagine yourself reading that, or imagine you getting that in a work context and how you would feel, because that's how the other person's going to feel when they read it. And sometimes it's hard for us to get that perspective on it. Focus on the outcome as well. What are you trying to achieve by making the complaint? What is it that you're trying to fix? What is it you're trying to raise, and what are you trying to ultimately achieve? And yeah, so then obviously if things aren't working, then there's obviously those additional legal complaint options. But again, as I've said, we suggest you get further support if you are at that point. If you do need more help, so the toolkit itself, it's available on our website. So it's disabilitylaw.org.au/projects/education. Also, you can call us if you've got sort of further questions as well. Our numbers are up there. Obviously, we are in New South Wales, but we can give referrals to lots of other places as well. And I will say the Toolkit website does have information about training, and we're happy to accept people for training. It's free training online. You can attend from anywhere, so that's fine. We do that about once a month, and the website has the up-to-date details about our next training session and other resources. The Toolkit's in also other languages as well. It's currently in Vietnamese, Mandarin, Cantonese, and Arabic. And it's also in other accessible forms. So it's in easy read, large print, Auslan, e-text, audio described, and available in Braille as well. So that's me. Hopefully some of that's been helpful. Are there any questions?